Well, here we are at another interview segment for Reunion Roadmap. This is Al McCarn, and with me from Har Bracha, the Mount of Blessing in Israel, in Samaria, in Israel, is Samuel Wearp. Hey, Samuel, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Al. Always good to be here.
We have some specific questions to address at the moment, but first one is you've been in Israel as we're talking now, end of January 2024. You've been in Israel for about 6 months or 7 months, and you're about to leave tomorrow. So where are you going and what are you going to do?
Yeah, well, actually, I haven't been in Israel for the past 6 or 7 months, so that's a whole other story. But I am going to. I'm headed towards Idaho. I have a good friend out there who's a sheriff's deputy, and he invited me to apply, and so I'm going to fill a position out there. And so, in the interim of whatever life holds, I believe life is a journey, and so we should engage with all of the opportunities that are presented before us. And this is one that felt right. And so, when I've learned over the years that generally, right? It's like there's this intuition that it's like it clicks, and you feel like, yeah, this is from God. This is kind of where He wants you. And so that's what I'm going to be doing for potentially the next upcoming year, 2024.
Well, very good. And Godspeed. And
Thank you.
I guess we will be careful when we're driving through that particular part of Idaho.
Yes.
Obey the speed limit and that sort of thing, right?
No, please don't, because then I have a job security. I need lots of friends to come break the rules so I can get some arrests and some tickets out.
Oh, goodness. Well, we could launch into a discussion of how grace works, but let's not. Let's talk about Israel. So I was mistaken. You hadn't been there for 6 or 7 months. Please correct my error.
No, yeah. So you are correct. My family has been here. Most of my family has been here for the past 6 to 7 months. I was here for obviously the tour that we all were here for the Nation Saint Vav, and we were here, going through, experiencing Israel from that perspective of the Jewish people and their experience of the Ninth of Av, and remembering the destruction of the two temples, and then looking at that tour, right, the rebirth of Israel and everything that's happening, and then right after that, close thereafter, I actually left on a trip to Africa. And so I was in Kenya for about a week and a half, maybe a little more. And I was there with some good friends. I was there with Dean Bai with his ministry called Return Ministries. Got to experience Kenya in a most amazing way. The people were amazing, lovely people, really people that loved God. And wanted to hear a message about Israel. And so going there was an experience in and of itself, but I thought it was so fulfilling. And I realized, like, that's, I think, the way that I like to travel. I'm not sure that I would have gone to Kenya for just a safari, but I mean, I got to do, but I'm not sure I would have gone there just for that. But to had the fulfillment of seeing people engage in the idea of Israel, especially people that have say been reading their Bibles for a long time, just have never made the connections to Israel, like as in a land in itself, and a people living in that land, and Jerusalem being like the capital city of God's kingdom was very amazing to see people like begin to grasp those concepts. And so during that time, it was a super amazing time. People that really loved God. People that really loved God and really wanted to follow Him, and they were so hungry for they wanted to do God's will, and that was the amazing thing to see. Something that I'd have noticed that I think is different, perhaps from many cultures, especially American culture, is like we like to hear good messages, but going to Kenya, it was like they heard and then they wanted to do. That was really amazing to see that. So from Kenya, I went back to the U.S. I returned. I visited one of my brothers there. I then went back to Missouri. I thought I was done with trips to Israel for the year. I felt like I needed to get back to the U.S., begin to start saving money and doing whatever other projects needed attention at the time. And so I went to visit friends over the holiday of Sukkot. I was in Texas with people that I knew, and I still remember. And I think it's one of those moments in life where you remember where you were when you hear that it happened. I remember as a I was very young, but I remember hearing about 9/11, where I was, and my thoughts about that whole situation. I was I believe 4 or 5, and so I didn't really understand what was going on. Yeah, I was 5. Didn't really understand what was going on, but I remember in my young mind being afraid of like airplanes coming out of the sky and crashing into homes, and then my mom said they only crash into big buildings, so I was worried about the church down the street because that was a big building. And right, so your mind connects to really momentous things that happen in this world. And so just like with 9/11, I also remember exactly where I was, and it would have been that night coming into Friday night into Shabbat. And one of the people that I knew, he said, "Hey, listen, because I also turn my phone off on Shabbat. I'm not connected to what's going on." And he said, "Hey, listen, I just want to let you know that they're shooting a bunch of rockets into Israel right now." And so, at the time, I thought, okay, that's pretty normal. That every once in a while they'll shoot rockets, and I don't think anybody could have fathomed or imagined what was actually transpiring. And so it wasn't, I didn't know, and I went to bed, and then it was the next morning that the horrifics of what actually happened began to be revealed. And I was in utter shock, and I think as most people were at what had happened. So that's where I was. And so I was stuck in the States, feeling rather helpless, watching everything unfold, and it was horrifying.
You had a similar thing with me. We were at Sukkot, and my phone blew up that morning. And as the pictures came out and the news came out, obviously it was something out of the ordinary. And good that you mentioned 9/11. I certainly lived through that as an adult. But the world changed then.
Mm.
And October 7th, for all who have eyes to see and ears to hear, understand that the world has changed. So one of the things, Samuel, I think that we ought to talk about is how has the world changed? I don't know if we want to get into that at the moment or just let it come out as we hear more of your story of what happened after that. But if you want to take a crack at it now, how is the world of October 6th, 2023 different from the world after that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think when we look at the world, we're beginning to see definitely some lines being drawn in the sand in regards to Israel, and also in regards to the nations of this world. For me personally, I'll just speak personally, and then maybe we can figure out how this fits into the reality of the big picture of where the world is. But for me personally, I had started making some steps in the U.S. of different things that I wanted to accomplish. I travel a lot, and so going back to the U.S., I was planning on getting some things accomplished while I was there, and I was in Texas, and I was in the U.S., and as soon as I heard what was going on, it was like all of the small projects and the things that I had going and the people that I was planning on meeting rather quite quickly fell to the wayside, and I realized that I needed to be here. Like that was where my heart was. And so I saw, since I was in the U.S., there wasn't much I could do, but there were a few things. And so, say one of the things that was going on in like the upcoming weekend was so after October 7th, so the next week was a rally in the U.S. in Dallas. And so I was there at the rally, at the event, and it was it was a beautiful event, and there were lots of support from a lot of Israelis, a lot of like Jewish people, and a lot of people from Israel, Israelis who were stuck in the U.S., and then just a lot of Christians. And it was beautiful to see everybody come together in support of Israel. And they had a lot of different speakers from various backgrounds, whether it be the rabbi of Dallas, or the Chabad rabbi of Dallas, or the a big pastor from Texas, or different people come and share and their support and how they were standing behind Israel and what needed to be done and such. And I just remember, for myself personally, standing in that rally and feeling just so useless. It was very hard for me to stand there and listen to all these people talking about go Israel, go. And it was even very hard for me to like just stand there and wave an Israeli flag, because the Israeli flag is not something, for me, it's not something that I stand there and wave and say go, go, go. It's something that I believe in. It's a vision that I stand behind. And so after that event, I was like, you know what, I have to be in Israel. I can't do this anymore. This is too difficult. And maybe that was, I think maybe it's a good step for some people. Maybe some people have never, like, before October 7th, even thought about Israel. And for them, it was their first step of getting out there and being in public, waving an Israeli flag. Maybe that was where some people needed to be. But for me, I knew there was more, and I had to go and be a part of that. And so the evening of that, after the event, the event was in the morning. The evening after that, or the evening of that day, I went to a event in Dallas where I spoke to a group of. It was a mixed group. There were a few Israelis there. There was a lot of Christians, a lot of supporters of Israel. I spoke to the group, and that was basically what I told them. I said, "Listen, I'm here whether you like it or not." And we've seen the revealing of what I would call the side that is anti-God, the side that is what I would really refer to as the spirit of the beast, is what I would call it in my terminology, because what I saw on October 7th, I can't, my human mind doesn't comprehend or understand that. And so I have to attribute it to something. And so I call it the spirit of the beast, is what I think we saw on October 7th. And because of that, what needs to be revealed now is the face and essence and presence of God to the world. And the way I believe that we do that is Jews and Christians coming together, even as when we see Jacob and Esau meet. Jacob says about Esau, he says, "When I saw your face, it was like seeing the face of God." And so when the brothers become united, all of a sudden we see a revelation of God's face and God's presence to the world. And so with that, with my heart, my vision and my mission being to see Israel, the ideal of Israel, to be spread around the world. It wasn't long before I was on a plane. I believe about a week after that event, I was on a plane here to Israel to come and do what I could to support and to speak life into the Jewish nation, and just to say that you're not alone, that we're here with you, which was powerful. And I realized that it was this trip in particular, I think, where you realize how many Jewish people actually do feel alone. They feel like they don't have friends in the world. And even though they hear maybe about some rally in Dallas, what they see more of is the hate and extremism and the propaganda of the left and of the mainstream media coming out of the U.S. and coming, quite frankly, from the worldwide, which was a shock. But I think with that shock, as we're talking about the decision that the world has been presented and how they've and where they're going with this. I think it just, in many ways, shows the reality of the Bible, and I think it affirms that that we're on the right path. And unfortunately, I believe, as it says in John, people loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil, and that's what we're seeing right now today.
I agree with you on that assessment. I don't know how far we want to go with this one, but it shouldn't be a surprise that the secular, progressive part of human society would be opposing Israel, and anti-Semitism come up there. We know where it would come from the far right, but what about within the people of God, or those who should know better, in the church, in the Messianic and Hebrew roots movement? Do you want to address that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Do I want to address that? I think the key words that you used there were perhaps the words "people of God." That's where the line is being drawn, and the true people of God are the people that are standing on the side of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and with his promises and on his word. And so I see a lot of people who might claim the title "people of God," but if you're not, I mean, this was the most basic, and not basic, maybe I say blatant showing of one side versus the other. Like, the world couldn't get a clearer picture of who Hamas is, of what these people are willing to do to the Jewish nation, how big this hatred really is, and they are unwilling to reject that. They're unwilling to condemn it. They can't even speak against it. And there's always this yes, but, or maybe, but if they're willing to recognize at all what happened on October 7th. And so we see that not just within the world and within the media, as you're saying, we see that within the people of I would say that the people that call themselves the people of God. And I would be hesitant to claim the title of a person of God if I oppose the people of God and I oppose what God's doing in the world. And when I side myself with an entity that the way I've begun describing it as is barbaric bastards, like there are no really words that I can. There's a loss of words for what I've actually seen and witnessed and heard testimony to, and all of the videos. And I know that Israel isn't perfect, and I know that we should seek the truth always, but I definitely see a clear line of light versus darkness. Like, that was what was revealed on October 7th, and in these past 100 and some days has been a war between light and darkness. And the reality is that the Muslims here understand that this is a religious war. The Jewish people here in Israel, I would say, are in a dilemma, because there's some that understand that this is a religious war, and there's some that they wanna play by the rules of the world and be accepted and loved by everyone. And the reality is for one thing, they should know from history that the world will never love a Jew. The only one that they seem to truly love is a dead one, and that's the only time that they might move a little bit, because I think October 7th was a huge shock, even to those on the left, because nobody could have imagined something so horrific. But they should know from history, right? The Jewish people should know from history that the world doesn't really side with them, and that they just need to be strong. They need to push forward with what that. Well, first of all, they need to recognize that this is very religious, and second of all, they need to recognize that they need to come into their calling of who God's desiring them to be, and that's or the Goyim, which is a light to the nations. And they need to see that, need to see and recognize their calling, and they're in that dilemma of figuring out how they go about that. Which to be honest, is a dilemma, because how do you do that right? And so that's a huge question of how you go about doing that right. And I wouldn't want to be, and I don't pretend to be an expert on the issue, and all of the Israeli politicians who are in very hard places. I pray for them, and I bless them, because they're in shoes that are way too large for me to fill for sure. But in many ways, I think they are still trying to play the game of being accepted by everyone, when they should realize that, unfortunately, the world is not pro-Jew. The world is not pro-Israel, mostly because they're not pro the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, yeah, it is a very religious war. The Muslims here know it. I mean, this war that we here in Israel call Iron Swords was called by them the Al-Aqsa flood, right? Al-Quds flood. So they understand that this is all about the Temple Mount. This is about Jerusalem. There's a war there, and we want to pretend that this is something else, or they just don't like us for some odd reason, or they don't like the Jewish people here for some odd reason. But the Muslims know, and I think many Jews are waking up to that reality as well. So this is something much bigger than maybe what most of the world would want to think it is, because the reality of the Bible is being played out right in front of our eyes.
Oh, you got that right. I'm thinking right now of what the Lord said through his prophet Hosea: my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge or lack of vision. And, that does apply to both halves of his covenant family. The Jewish half, which is, from where I sit here in South Carolina today, I'm seeing whether you're a Israeli citizen or you live in Brooklyn, you have to come to grips with the fact that you're Jewish, and that means you are of the chosen people, and that means someone has chosen you, meaning the God of Abraham. So what does that mean? And then us on the Christian side, we're grafted in or adopted into the same family, and we have to come to terms with, hey, those Jewish people, they are chosen by God to be his visible representation on earth. And it seems that after October 7th, the veils have been torn away. And I'm seeing the connections. I mean, it goes back to now we're studying the Torah portions about the Exodus from Egypt, but we could look at the events around Purim, when Esther and Mordecai were dealing with the same spirit that tried to destroy the Jews for the same reason. Or we're looking at what happened in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the same spirit tried to prevent them from doing what God said: return to my land, rebuild my city, rebuild my temple, reinstitute what I have given you so you can be a light to the nations. So now that's where I see the world has changed, and it is a dividing line, and you've articulated that very well, Samuel. But let's get into how could you miss this? It sure does seem that the majority of people here in the United States, Christian or otherwise, are oblivious to it. You have recently visited, in fact, I think it was yesterday, was your second trip down south to where the massacres happened, at the site of the Nova Festival, at the Kibbutzim, Kfar Aza, and Be'eri. I assume you've also been to sites like Auschwitz and other Holocaust sites. What's different about these places right there in the land of Israel that were devastated on October 7th, on Simchat Torah?
Yeah, well, I think we could, you've pointed out that there's some similarities, and I guess that's just the fact that we see throughout history with the story of Purim, the story of Hanukkah, with the story of all these different histories, also with the Holocaust, that there is a very there's a spirit in this world that seems to continue to raise its head, called the spirit of anti-Semitism, anti anti-Bible, anti-God, or anti the God of Israel, I should say. But then what is the difference? Yeah, I would say one of the big differences is that for many Israelis, it was a shock because Auschwitz represents the Jews of exile, right? There were people that had made their homes elsewhere that didn't think the land they kind of, the land of Israel was important, but maybe for some time in the future. And it wasn't until after the Holocaust, the Shoah, that the Jewish people recognized, no, we need our own state, or we need a place of refuge for the Jewish people. So now, 1948, some 70 years later, we have a beautiful state, a beautiful home that the Jewish people have built. And this was their home, right? This was the place that they could come, and they have an army, and they can keep themselves safe. And then all of a sudden this happens. That was in many ways the difference. It's because the Jewish people had been saying for so long, well, this happened. Things like the Shoah were allowed to happen because we didn't have a homeland. We didn't have a state. We didn't have a place of refuge to go to. And now all of a sudden we have October 7th, right? And it's happening in our very backyard. Prior to October 7th, the land of Israel was going through a very tumultuous season, a time of a lot of turmoil, a time of a lot of division, disunity, a lot of infighting, a lot of just fighting, a lot of what the sages would call sinat chinam, baseless hatred, just right versus left, Haredim, the ultra-religious against the secular, all kinds of division and hatred and turmoil. And October 7th, all of a sudden, there was no more right and left, and there was no more religious and secular. All of a sudden, there was Am Israel. It was the people of Israel. It was Am Israel, and they were there to do whatever they needed to do for their brothers, for their friends, for each other. Why that happened? Why October 7th happened? It's hard to say. It was 12 to 1,400 innocent lives, plus another 197, which was the death toll of soldiers, I believe yesterday. It's probably more now. Why that had to happen, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, well, this is the reason. But I will say that after the fact, we see the nation of Israel as one nation. And that in turn means that they're one light. They're able to be one light to the world. There's not all of these different lights trying to say, we're the light, or this is the light, or we have the light, come follow our light. Now the nation of Israel is one nation, and they're united to fight evil, to destroy something that came to destroy them. And so the sages have a saying. They say, beware lest you open a fence, lest the dog bite you. And they say, well, what does having an open fence have anything to do with the dog biting you? And they say, well, if you leave a fence open, then you actually open the door for the dog to come in. And when the dog comes in, he will bite you. And that's what I think we saw happen with the Jewish people. And what was the fence they left open? The fence that they left open wasn't a physical fence so much as it was a spiritual fence of offense. It was an offense against Jew. It was a lot of hatred ongoing in this country, which God, thank God, we've seen suddenly change. And so all of a sudden there's a real spirit of love. There's a real spirit of unity. There's a real spirit of everyone being there for each other that is broken out across this nation. And it's a beautiful thing to experience and to witness and to see, and also to be a part of, to actually come and see the Jewish people, I guess, see that healing process taking place of being able to love each other, and to see families become reunited once again, families that have been fighting over politics and all these other, I would say, lesser important issues that seem to divide us so quickly have gone to the wayside. And so it's been an amazingly different trip here to Israel, to see the nation of Israel as one for the first time in a long time. And I think that October 7th was just the beginning of seeing the nation united. And unfortunately, these are the kinds of things that it seems that these are the things that it takes to bring the people of Israel together. And so, chas v'shalom, God forbid, but this might not be the last of the October 7th that we might see the world coming up to. But I think that the Jewish people are becoming a more strong and united nation. I should say the nation of Israel is becoming a more strong and united nation. And there are Jewish people that are coming home because of that. And so I would also add that I heard this story. It was this was a rabbi by the name of Yitzhak ben Meir. He said that this was, I believe, during the Yom Kippur War, which was very similar to October 7th, a surprise attack that caught Israel totally off guard. He said that he had been fighting in the trenches, and it was a very hard war. Israel had been caught completely surprised, and so it was a vicious war, and it was a war that there was a lot of effort that they had to put out in order to win that war. And Baruch Hashem, praise God, they did. But this one, he's a rabbi now. He wasn't a rabbi at the time. This Yitzhak ben Meir, he said he went. He had some leave, and during hhis leave, leave is to go off and see family and to take a rest and get your laundry done and eat some good food. He said, but for him, the most important thing that he felt he needed to do was go and talk to his rabbi. And so within his time of leave, he went to his rabbi, and he said he met his rabbi at the door, and it's like, Shalom, Rabbi, I was hoping I would be able to talk to you. And the rabbi didn't really even recognize Yitzhak, like say, as a person. All he said was, "Where's the document?" And Yitzhak ben Meir was taken aback. He was like, what are you talking about? Where's the document? Rabbi, I'm your student. I've been away at war. We've been. And the rabbi was like, "Where's the document?" And Yitzhak was like, I don't have any document. What are you trying to say here? I just came. I wanted to talk to you. And then the rabbi says, "Listen, Yitzhak, I see that the war, has you confused and befuddled, and you're very upset about what has happened." He said, "But where's the document that says that the redemption is just going to come easy? Where's the document that says that, the Jews are going to return home and everything's going to be roses and daisies, and we're all just going to enter into a wonderful time?" It's like, there is none. There isn't. So we have to realize that, oftentimes with the roses come the thorns. And that's, I believe, what we're seeing here is the process of Geulah, the process of redemption. There's something very beautiful even now that we get to experience. We get to see the unity of Israel, the Jewish people. We get to see, the wilderness once again becoming like a garden, the garden of God. We're seeing that happen here in the land of Israel. We're seeing children playing in the streets of Jerusalem, right? We're seeing all these things happening, and yet at the same time, we are also seeing the thorns. We're seeing the October 7th. We're seeing the things that hurt and that pain us. And it's both that are needed in order to see the ultimate Geulah, in order to see the ultimate redemption. So, there is no, say, document that says this is how it's going to happen. We have kind of a manuscript, and it gives us, this is where we are. So right now is a time for planting vines. I would say right now, the season that we're living in is a time of taking up the sword. It's a time of war, truly, in any way that you can, right? And so for people that are good spokespeople, then it's a time for speaking words of truth. For the people that are good with the pen, the pen is mightier than the sword. It's a time of taking up the pen and telling the reality of what's happening here. If it's people that are good with their hands, then it's a time for them to take their hands and come and either do things in wherever they are, wherever country they are, in order to spread the news of what's happening here, or it's actually to come here and to serve. But whatever it is, now is the time of war. It's a time of us coming together and saying, what is our part in what we see happening? The other side seems to know that there's going to be a struggle, and the other side seems to be preparing for that, and they seem prepared for that, and they seem to be amping up to attempt to destroy the light that is in this world. And so we need to prepare the same, not out of hatred, but out of love. And I think that was something that I also didn't appreciate when I first heard a lot of people talk about what was happening here in Israel. Some of the first things I heard was, oh yeah, Israel needs to go and just bomb the snot out of Gaza, and go in and just kill every man, woman, and child. And it's very easy to say, and I love how a lot of people like to say things like that, because I feel like if you want to sound so smart, if you want to say your spiel, I guess you could say, about go and slaughter everyone, then don't make the Jewish people do that. You take the sword and you go and kill women and innocents. Don't go and have the Jewish people do the dirty work for you. If that's what you want to do, then you come and do it. And the reality is that nobody's brave enough to actually do that. And also, it's not even right. We're not the other side. We're not Hamas. We don't represent that side. We don't kill innocent women and children. And in many ways, I heard somebody talk about this: beware lest you become what you hate. The reality is, I could never become, and the Jewish people could never become what they hate, because that's not even in them. That's not who they are. What I saw in Be'eri, and what I saw in Kfar Aza, and what I saw in Sderot, and all of those places, you can't become that. Like it's impossible. The level of demonic, barbaric bastards where they were is a kind of darkness that I think most of us don't even know and don't even understand or comprehend. But that's not who we are. And so we're here to bring light and truth. And even if the world stands against the Jewish people, we're not gonna change. We're not gonna become what we hate. In many ways we can't become what we hate, but we're not gonna go. The Jewish people aren't going to go and bomb the snot out of Gaza. They're sacrificing their boys, a lot of young men, in order to do this as humane as possible. And the thing is, war is never clean, never scrubbed like the history books make it out to be. And so I think that's just the reality of us living in today's world, and seeing a war broadcast to everyone. But then you look at the statistics, and I believe it was even the UN itself came out with a statistic that said that the reality of what we see in Israel versus modern warfare is generally the casualty of civilian to combatant is 9-1. Here in Israel, it's at 1.5 to 1. And that's just the reality of war. But yeah, Israel is dealing with this in the best way that they can, with the scrutiny of the world above them. And so for us, I really think it's we need to take our place in this war. Like I said before, the Muslims and the people that side with Hamas and the other side, they know this is a war, and they even know what it's about. Right? They called it the Al-Aqsa flood. They know what it's about. We need to also engage and understand what this is about. This is about the kingdom of light versus the kingdom of darkness. And if you claim to be a person of God, if you say and include yourself in the people of God, then you need to be engaged.
As always, being engaged means get to know the issues.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest hurdles we face is God's people, as we've discussed it. Those who have the label Christian, Jewish, Hebrew roots, Messianic, they're just ignorant of the scriptures. But start there and learn, what is Israel? Why is Israel? Why did God create this nation and set them apart from all other nations? What does it mean that the Jewish people are the visible remnant of Israel today? And what are God's promises to the Jewish people? I think if we start there, that should open the way to all the other things we're talking about. And we could go into how this war is being prosecuted. I've had that conversation more than once. I know the American way of war. I know the German way of war. I know the Russian way of war. Now I'm learning the Israeli way of war. Yeah, it's true. The Israelis go to war even to their own hurt, bending over backwards, even if someone appears to be an innocent civilian, rather than the young teenager carrying the grenade concealed in his jacket or something. Now they bend over backwards to try to preserve life. Let me ask you this one, Samuel, because this is when I realized early on that Kibbutz Be'eri and many of the communities that were overrun and suffered the most grievous harm on October 7th, as you say, barbarities, demonic barbarities, they were the Peace Now people, the ones who they bent over backwards to try to open the way to Gazans, to Palestinians, to bring them into medical appointments in Israel, to employ them in their own communities. They were the ones who were walking out the peace process. Now, I surmise that our politics would be 180 degrees out. But what occurred to me as I realized this is, even in that process, these precious lives, these secular, peace-oriented Jews who may not have been to temple since their bar or bat mitzvah, they were living out the mitzvah, the commandment to, live at peace with your neighbors. And in a very real way, the fact that they did that with their politics, their religious beliefs, whatever it was, they were just as important as showing to the world Israel is a light to the nations, and Israel has been over backwards, even to its own hurt, to try to live at peace with the other peoples in the land. So that in itself should be a trigger and should be evidence to anyone who wants to accept it, that what we're dealing with here now is something demonic that is opposing the redemptive plans of the God of the universe, who created Israel for that purpose. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think, of course, as you said, with these people, our politics might have been 180 degrees different in many ways, and yet we did see a people that though not very religious at all, definitely, as it says in Torah, seek peace and pursue it. Right, that was their lives, and they were doing the mitzvah of loving their neighbor. They were doing the mitzvah of attempting to live at peace in the land. They were also living the mitzvah of being here in the land of Israel. That's a huge mitzvah. It's a lot of Jewish people that I believe it was Rav Kook that said the most secular Jew in the land of Israel is more religious than the most religious Jew in New York or in the exile. And so we had people that really loved Eretz Israel. They poured their hearts and their lives into the land. And they poured their hearts into the lives of believing that there was a possibility for peace, the reality of peace between and coexistence. And the crazy thing is that I spoke with somebody, our tour guide yesterday, the tour guide of Be'eri, that was taking us around. He lost his father. He lost his aunt. He lost his uncle. His mom, his sister, and her 4 children were all taken hostage into Gaza and were just released, like in the last hostage deal. His brother-in-law is still in Gaza. Last they know, he was still alive, and they pray for his return. And you can also pray for his return. His name is Tal Shoam. Pray for his safe release along with all the hostages. And this man, who has lost so much and seen the worst of humanity and experienced so much hurt and so much tragedy all in one day, said that he still believes that in peace. And he still believes that one day maybe we'll figure this out, which is amazing to hear his level of believing in that reality, of being able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, of course, humanity has seemed to have gone crazy, and it does seem as though all of the world is positioning itself for a revelation of hatred, unlike the world has seen before. But I just thought to see a man like that who has lost so much and hurt so much, be able to say that he still believes in peace, was amazing. And so, as it says in the Psalms, Ani Shalom, I'm for peace, but when I speak, they're for war. But it literally says in Hebrew, it says Ani Shalom, I am peace. And so wherever we go, that should be our message, right? Even for the soldiers in Gaza. I mean, I have friends that are there fighting right now. Their message is Ani Shalom. The message is people of peace. They're fighting in a war they didn't want, and they didn't even realize it was necessary until October 7th. They thought, like many of the people in the community thought, that there would be peace and that we could work this out. And yet the reality is that the Palestinians, who these people did take care of and allowed to come into the communities to work, and who they did bring to hospitals within Israel for better medical treatment, and who they did befriend and invite over to family barbecues, all of that. These people used that knowledge for this attack. The Yuval, who was our tour guide yesterday in Beirut, was sharing some of the stories of what happened, and he said that these people were so prepared, the terrorists, let's just call them what they are, the barbaric bastards of October 7th. He said they were so prepared that they knew that they had a mission. They would go. They were assigned a town, and they went to the town. And when they went to the town, they had it already all planned out. They knew where the Kitat Konanut, where the first responders, the emergency security teams lived, and those were the first houses they went to take those people out. They knew it. They knew beforehand. This is how prepared they were. They went to people's houses and they called people out by name. They would call them by name. That's how prepared they were. And then they would say, "Listen." They spoke in Hebrew. They would call people, say, "Listen, it's the army. Come out." And they would come out and they would be mowed down. That's how prepared these people were. And I think the one thing that stuck with me, and to show the level of hatred that these people had for these Jews, was when Yuval told the story of when his family was taken hostage. He said that his dad and his mother and his sister and brother-in-law and the 4 children were all there together for Shabbat. And when everything went down, they ended up into the bomb shelter. And so they were hiding in the mamad, in the bomb shelter. And it was a sealed room, and they sealed the door, and the husband, or the brother-in-law and the father were holding the door shut and ensuring that they wouldn't break through. And then there was the window, and the window has an iron, like a steel shutter that would shut. And so, for safety reasons and for the rockets and such, so it was extra protected. And so they were in there for, I believe it was maybe 6 hours or so. And the whole time when these barbaric bastards were in the community, they were basically looking for ways to get into the shelter because they knew there were Jews hiding in there. And you think after, listen, I'm not I wouldn't, I would, I mean, I would call myself a reasonably hardworking person, but, usually if I'm working on a project and I get stuck at something, give me about half an hour, maybe an hour, and then I'm like, yeah, it's not going to work. I'm just going to move on and do something else and then maybe come back. No, the hatred that these people had, and knowing that there were Jews still alive and still safe within a bomb shelter, drove these people mad that for 6 hours they stood there trying to figure out a way to get into that bomb shelter. To do what? So that they could kill Jews. After 6 hours, they figured they couldn't get in, so they went. There were tractors and machinery and equipment. They went all the way over to grab machinery from the kibbutz, and they drove it all the way up, and they cut the trees out of their little orchard there, and they drove the machine to where they could get the bucket in, and they busted through the window with the bucket of the machine. And then they got to Yuval's father and mother and his brother-in-law and his sister and their 4 children. They stood there for 6 hours trying to get at Jews. That was the level of hatred that they had. And that just stuck with me. The reality of how much hatred there was, that they should, like, that was their thing. They were there for 6 hours, and the only reason they were there was because they knew there were Jews that were safe, and that bothered them. Yuval lost his father as they were dragging the family out. They shot his father. He said they don't know why, because there was really no reason. They had gotten to them. They came out of the bomb shelter. They ripped them out through the window. He said, my sister clung on to the children. She wouldn't let them go. The terrorists tried to take the children away. He said that she grabbed them and held on to them. Wouldn't let anybody touch her children, like a mama bear. And then they were taken. His father was shot, killed, and the rest of them were taken into Gaza. And that's what those people had to go through. So I'm sorry, I feel like I've gone off from the question. I don't even remember what the question was, but that's the reality of what we saw on October 7th, was such a deep hatred. People taking advantage of love and of friendship that had been extended. And that's what we see in the Psalms, right? David writes, I'm for peace. I am peace. Ani shalom. I am peace. And yet they are there for war. They don't want peace. They don't desire shalom. And I think the biggest reason why is because shalom is one of the names of God. And so you can't have true shalom if you're not willing to recognize the God of Israel. And so that's until people humble themselves and are willing to submit, then this war is an ongoing war. It's an ongoing conflict until the end.
Well, Samuel, you have answered the questions very well. And I think that's a good place to end this particular conversation, but
For sure.
the conversation will continue in many forms in days and years to come.
Yes, it will. But God willing, I don't know if I want years, because we need Mashiach now. We need Messiah now, but days I'll give you.
Amen. Thank you, Samuel Wearp, and God bless you in your new endeavor in Idaho and
Yes.
in your return to Israel in God's timing.
Amen. Soon in our days. God bless. Thank you.